with Spirit of Matter. So we are on a Venus day, and this is Mercury hour. And I wanted to jump on for some astro vlog, Friday vlog. Um the moon has just ingressed into Cancer, releasing from a square to Neptune in Pisces. This is a 29-degree Libra ruled ascendant. Let's see what will come up. With Venus in the 18th degree of Gemini, releasing from its cosimi into combustion with the Sun in Gemini, 17 Gemini, and very close to vertex. So let's see what will arise in the conversation. Mars is conjuncting the descendant, releasing from the conjunction to Aries in Aries. Jupiter is 2 degrees Gemini. Mercury, the ruler of the hour, 2 degrees Gemini. Sun, we said, and the midheaven is 1 degree Leo, ruled by the Sun. Saturn has gone out of the 18th degree. I'm going to dedicate some time to this in this episode. And the IC is conjuncting Pluto retrograde. So, a couple of things that's been happening. First of all, how I've been experiencing the transits. The Jupiter Gemini is doing a good job for me with looking at those decentralized social media. I know this wasn't the best election, but I tried to hop onto TikTok and Rockefeller Astro Leaks, which breaks down to basically asteroid Rockefeller next to my midheaven, leaks Neptune next to my midheaven, Astro for I have Uranus in the 10th house. And that's a bit of a satire news, something that is taking a part of what I'm doing here into TikTok and BitChute, which is I followed the Imagination podcast and I'm like, oh, let's see what is this far right wing. They say they won't shadow ban me, let's give it a shot. But there are also other decentralized social stuff, including emails, and so kind of replacement for the stuff that we've been doing. So every once in a while I try that. I am on Mastodon. I don't even remember what my nickname on Mastodon is, but it's hey, it's happening. And the Jupiter Gemini began for me with logging off Google, off X, off Facebook, uninstalling WhatsApp, and trying new things, and really thinking about what the role of all these media stuff is in my life. And now it kind of begins with trying out different technological applications and so on. So I kind of like to see what's happening. So right now I'm not so active on X. I think I just got frustrated like many people. I don't blame anybody particular for this frustration, but the same inquisition that funds the World War. But it is frustrating, okay? And I think that another thing that's been happening with kind of this Venus cosimi in Gemini, I think for the continuation of exposing what's happening in the music industry. Jagger Wright got her own platform, and I think that's worth examining, worth looking at. It's very depressive to see how pretty much all the music, regardless of the genre we grew up on, was enabling horrors. But this is also true to our cell phone. So that is something I guess we are dealing with. I see it as a part of the Pluto stuff. But the Venus point can accentuate on the music industry, or music as an industry, or music as a trade, or social conflicts and music, and art and expression and vlogs. And I think that this is something we'll see more of. Okay, so after Jag turned for Jay, and apparently she is a victim of Jay-Z. I believe her, of course, like it goes without saying. And now she's turning to like kind of like the margins of the industry. Even people you think like, Badu. And if you saw me taking down Swift Decultified, which is the short I made for basically taking favorite songs and making other lyrics to them. So what if this song was decultified? Because I kind of gave reference to Badu, and then I was like, oh, I had a feeling that Badu is going to be mentioned. So yes, she was mentioned. And you really kind of get to understand it's like there isn't anybody that doesn't know anybody. And that's when the Peter rings drop. And I think that the good thing that's coming out when this falls apart is those voices that we weren't listening to, we weren't aware of, we weren't even, the algorithm didn't even bring them up. And now we get the chance to rethink kind of the music industry. I think that this will proceed with the kind of new Venus cycle, which is the 8 years Venus cycle, the voice and trade, the voice and money, the voice and social media, the voice and technology, and bifurcation of the voices. So all things Gemini. In general, we've probably been feeling that with the experience on social media in recent years. And I think this is somehow began even back in 2014, 2015 at the Arab Spring. And then at the aftermath, we could have a kind of a local Me Too vibe. But this is where, kind of like the higher ups got to like, hey, there's this thing that's going out of hand. There's this social media thing, and people actually begin to discuss and expose stuff. And we need to do something about this. And so, and on the other hand, the people wanted to have like their own business running. So we had a movement of kind of like the cult towards the people. So influencers would be targeted, and I think the TikTok dancing squad, that was basically a dancer influencers cult, and so it's kind of like the cult got to the influencers, and it's probably a long time ago. But this is both resolving the inner frustrations that we all have, even back for 2006, 2007 when YouTube was just new. And I think I told my own personal story of it. I was just, just like I'm doing here sometimes, open mic, spit venom, mic drop. But then it was not so political. I was just trying to record like music and collab with people. And I ran into a person who was doing very interesting stuff, but it's very likely either they try to do music outside of the cult, and he kind of got bigger, influential, and he knew how to attract people and so on. But then very likely maybe the cult got to him, and it was not nice to be one of his like closer correspondents at that time. Or alternatively, that he was trying to do non-mainstream music from within the cult, and then it was what that entails again. Okay. And that puts in perspective a lot of things that were even horrid, okay, that you go through where you're just recording some songs and then people do weird shit to your consciousness, and you're like, well, I'm sovereign for my consciousness, and there's something really weird going on here that you don't know how to give it a name. So you try to resolve it in yourself first, and like people outside don't really know what you're talking about, because that's at the juncture of everywhere. So even if you go like to a consultant or healer, and now unfortunately also astrologer, I have to say is very likely true. They had to be within the cult in order to get clients. Okay, so on the one hand, things that are from the past begin to make sense now, especially as Neptune is closing its phase in Pisces. And so if in the past you would say, oh, that was gaslighting, that was emotional abuse, that was sexual abuse, that was like, that was the cult. They had to do that for the cult. Otherwise, they would be assassinated, dead, harassed at work. So it was like a perpetrator and prey environment for whatever they did. And that puts it into perspective, but it's also the deep call. It's like, hey, that needs to be changed. When it comes to, I think anybody who is what we call now content creator, and perhaps was journalist, perhaps was media person, perhaps was author, poet, singer, musician, producer, and the cult either got to you, and then you could bifurcate, and even if you would try, like I did, to just get a job, then you would see the corruption, that the cult is also there, or the corruption is also there. And so I think for many of the voices that were not heard, okay, and were not respected and did not reach exposure, it's a kind of an understanding that, hey, it's not just like you or your talent or what you did invest or didn't put into your work. It is also your body was responding to the crime that there is when you try to just make a living. And I think we're going to be having more on that, with the emphasis on children, with the emphasis on women in particular with this cycle, because this is kind of like the Venus point. So it does sextile, Venus now sextiles, applying to sextile Mars and Aries and so on. But it was, and Mars was with Aries, so I hope we get some justice also for the young boys. Although this one is mainly emphasizing for the children and the women, maybe the trans women, and so the men would get their fair share of validation exposure, hopefully with the Aries cycle and the shade of the eclipse that we're still experiencing that happened in Aries. And both are important. Okay, one affects the other, both are important. And I want to say something about that Mars Aries. So I had kind of logged onto Facebook, and I have a lot of hats because I tried a lot of things, but because I tried a lot of that's I'm a person of many hats, but also it's if this workplace is corrupt, so I will try another workplace. Maybe I should try something else. Maybe it's a calling for something. And one of these things that I was involved with is sex positive education, and kind of like the industry of workshops around sexuality and so on, that had a lot of pros and cons, and it has its own Me Too kind of exposure back in 2019 actually. However, one of the posts that I saw was of a man who was doing a sex positive sexual education, and he asked the young boys, children, okay, youth, for when you already talk about sexuality, how do you call your genitals? Okay, so the penis. And answers that he got, this is happening in Israel, but for sure in other places too, was bone breaker, stuff to do with weapon, okay, and okay, there were all kind of funny things, like the thing that makes the corners white, which is I don't know what they do there, but that was funny. But other than funny and just weird things that can look funny to children for when they play with themselves, there were really disturbing things. And that can only be explained if it's a whole class. So it's not oh, there was just one student that went through sexual assault. It's basically an entire class that either they heard it from their parents, or they heard they must have got it somewhere. And why would they hear it from their parents? And this is beyond army or anything. It's not, if army was nothing to do with army. is basically to do with cult. Um, and those weird rituals to do in cults and how that affects the children. And so I think the Mars rules the penis, rules, you know, the genitals and so on. And Aries is that which has been marginalized, that which has been not included. And I think this kind of conversation brought into the discourse for where that how the cults are affecting our children. Okay, how is the fact that we have world war every couple of decades or so is affecting for our children? How is what the parents are doing affecting for our children and our youth? And that is you know, one of these things that are going to affect the sexual energy, the sexual health, the endocrine system, the nervous system, the ability to have satisfying life, satisfying relationships, not just with romantic relationships, relationships in general, the expression, the ability to relate, the ability to have a good orgasm, to have a good sexual experience, all of that is being infiltrated and thoroughly challenged for young kids. I think this Mars Aries has been going through such themes. Okay, it's Pride Month, but that's kind of like it's usual. It's like that's every year. It's Pride Month, and but here is more like, hey, let's talk about those stuff we haven't been talking. And another thing that kind of came up when I understand how deeply ingrained those hidden secret societies, but it's not the secret societies, okay, and sororities and youth. How do I say it without saying Hitler Jugend? I can't. It's a Hitler Jugend wherever it is, including Israel, okay, including Israel. So taking young children and putting them in order and like taking their childhood away is basically what it's doing, and putting initiation under the rituals, which can be satanic rituals, can be all that kind of stuff, and charging money. I also want you to listen to Emily Harper, who experienced it from a Christian point of view, where her parents sent her away. And this is the troubled teen industry, where she was, yes, queer, and then maybe smoked some weed or something like that. And what were her experience in that troubled child school, where if you go online, you would see horses and children playing and everybody happy and a beautiful scenario, beautiful place. Do you think that's and very expensive? I think that's like the best place to send your children, especially if they're troubled, the most humane, for them to come back and to integrate within society. And then what actually they're experiencing there. So I definitely suggest you would listen to Emily Harper. She's also a great makeup artist. So if you like that, the type of content, so that is another go-to channel. And when I understand how much that is so deeply ingrained, the point that is rising, because I know clock strikes 12, Pluto goes November 19. Remember 19th of November, Pluto goes into Aquarius for a 20 years cycle. All the Masons, all the cults, everybody's gonna want to kill everybody. And I think the point is not like, oh my God, look at this terrible cult even now, because now we're talking about this. Now we're exposing that. Now it's becoming more and more difficult to silence people, especially when there's some fiscal changes that we would need to understand that allow for this. And so now we also know that Pluto is going to reach its, a time in history where all of this rubbish is put to exposure, and to purging and to changing and deeply transforming our science. Okay, so this is the time of what people call scientific revolutions, our religions, our structures in society, political structures. Okay, France to the French Revolution, and so on. Application of social contracts theorists. But what is important right now is how to address this issue without making it a witch hunt, because there isn't anybody that doesn't know anybody, and most people, either they are trapped wanting to get out of this, or within peer pressure. And when you try to really step out, you are on a freaking island, and you better you better pray it's not an Epstein one. Okay? Most of us are social creatures. Most of us do want to relate, do want to have society around us. So the issue is not to start witch hunting each other, but yes, to tend to these issues. Okay? So, and this is going to be very important, because even when you look at secret societies and you look at all of that, they cut dividends to wealth. Families that cut dividends still today to the church, and it's not the Pope. The Pope is kind of like the presenter that is being elected. Okay, the Pope is kind of like the Beyonce of the Vatican. You understand, these people are groomed into this industry to do what they came here to do. And that's also important, because because this is all designed so that people will chase for the face, the sun, and want to take down the sun. But hey, these people been taking down the sun and doing black sun rituals since like the Inquisition. And so whether it's the Antichrist or the Christ, is the same praxis when it comes to ritual sacrifice, when it comes to shaming people for the sexuality. Both in the sense of like, hey, if you don't, damned if you don't, damned if you do. Okay, but not what I call, what I repeatedly quote Tom Jacobs saying, not the saying yes, no, and maybe according to your authentic, what you see fit. And speaking of Tom Jacobs, he's running a Lilith retreat. So you might want to turn over and see. Okay, so he's channeling like Metadron and Jehuti and so on. So I can't say I agree, like it's that this is portraying my spiritual worldview like one-on-one. No, okay, I don't think we came here to be abused. I don't think, yes, all of that. But he definitely does have good teachings to go back to your energy, to say yes, no, and maybe as you should, to define yourself, who you are, and great Chiron teaching and Lilith teaching that are not patriarchal, which I find deep and fascinating, and definitely worth the money if you can invest. So don't get dividends for that currently. I'm open to getting dividends for that, but I don't currently. And so this is also important to keep in mind, that what we want is to have that ability to say yes, no, and maybe to as per what we decide, and the ability to define ourselves for ourselves, and the ability to have our basis, okay, sense of belonging, independent of Inquisition structure, which and this is going to the root of the root of the root, and all of these structures are amounting to still in large quantities the Vatican, that are by offshore banking, OPDE, and so on. Definitely they own the Jews. Okay, everybody said they own the Jews, and they would spread anti-Semitism as they fit, or Judeo-Christian union as they fit, according to their business. And money goes, for when you are, if you are anti-Jews, then you want weapon. If you are for Jews, then you want weapon. They sell the weapon, okay? And that is basically, how these things go. And then there are like the Islamic wealth families that try to with relative varies of success kind of get into that business. And I don't know exactly the relation between those. We've definitely been having the beginning of the union of the Sunni and the Shia, but it's not necessarily unionizing with women rights, LGBTQ rights, and so on. So this is religious changes that are happening related to the B6 star with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And that's kind of like the current update, what's been on. And I think that when we keep those things in mind, we understand that it's not about making it a witch hunt, because witch hunt is a lucrative business for the Inquisition that you want to finish by this witch hunt. So same thing, okay? It's not about whether the person is doing, let's say, psychology or not. The question is, what is the structure from within this person operates, okay? Is this person giving full sovereignty to the person in front of them while teaching them about the technique that they're using, okay? It's not mind controlling them, but giving them, this is what it is, this is what the communication pattern is, and so the person can allow for understanding what is going on, whether it's astrology, okay? So again, it's not about if the astrologer is certified and this and this and that. It's about what is the place for your sovereignty as a human being, okay? If I give you reading, yes, and you don't like my reading, let's say you paid $1,000, okay? With inflation now, $1,000 you paid for my reading, okay? You paid for my reading, you didn't like the reading, you didn't connect with me, that's $1,000 gone, okay? You will go to another reader. You will go to another person. Or you can tell me, listen, this is what I didn't like, okay? But when it comes to structure of certification, okay, now it will be subsidized. Now we will have to go to the people who are with a certain cult that can allow for exposure in the algorithm. And you don't necessarily get the best of astrology because divergence in the discourse is needed. Now it's not $1,000 that you'll be missing, but your entire life, because there would be no junctures that you can go and find an individual who's not called affiliated. And I had a friend that really liked what I do when I'm writing, but she couldn't stand the fact that I do astrology because she had a big business and had a rough patch in the marriage and so on, and went to healers and went to astrologers. And she said, when somebody will see me that I'm supposed to shine or maybe outshine them in terms of publicity, because everybody wants to be famous, they will do anything to put me down. And I believe her, because if she was around these, around these places where the astrologers really are kind of like a celebrity, then I get that they're probably cult affiliated. And if she was naive to be not cult affiliated, but doing, this publicity or that publicity for this star, for that star, very soon she would get betrayed by the entire industry, which is what happened to her. And then, of course, you want to kill everybody. You want no one to have the ability to do any type of reading, any type of this, any type of that. So this is, again, with the dogmas that we have in Aquarius, is the new dogma, okay? We really need to be able to hold for intricacy for what is the problem? Is the problem the psychology? Is the problem the structure? Is the problem how do we change for what is called affiliated and is diverting our thought from the real thing? For example, saying that if you were 12 years old and you went through assault and now you're an adult, you have responsibility, we have no tools and practices and healing and validation to go about and replenish that which was missing, grieve that which was missing. And even then you would not be able to, very likely, to have the responsibilities that the person who didn't go through what you went through has in society, without feeling like something inside you is dead inside and you are sacrificing you to be appropriate to society, okay? So same with astrology, okay? When we look at incarnations and past life and this or that, yes, there are fascinating things and fascinating teachings. If you are, let's say, an eclipse child, or in other situations where karma plays or fate plays like deep structure in your chart, then all those Pluto soul, which I love the Pluto souls, okay, my parents are Pluto souls, astrologers who gave me the kind of like, hey, you need to do astrology, a Pluto soul. David Icke is Pluto soul, okay? Like I love Pluto soul. That being said, this you can outcome everything in your life. You decide who you are and so on. And when you decide it, then you will do it. And it's lovely. But if you are an eclipse child, you've not been doing it over and over again, and it falls to the point for like, hey, but hey, you can do that. Hey, but hey, you can do that. Or like, I cannot. It's like, no, it's your belief. No, it's your perception. No, it's your this. No, it's your this. Sometimes it's the chart. Okay. And so it's also important to understand that, whereas we don't want to undermine the role of agency when we do go to astrologers, and we definitely don't want to be in a situation where fellow readers will will fear somebody will outshine them in the celebrity culture because they're a great singer and they have great relational, I don't know, business, marketing, image. So they might fear, and then the competition is very hard, and so they might try to outshine, to put some person in a psychic ward. This is what happened to my friend, try to put her in a psychic ward, again, because very likely she was not called affiliated, but she was working with the tops of the industry that were. This is the time and the season where the profession of air is going to get very credited. Okay, so we're going to have marginalized things we didn't think of taking place in the discourse. Aquarius is the sign of air. Okay, it's not Virgo where we talk about chemistry or particle physics. Okay, it's where we talk about cosmology, but it's also when we talk about the particles of the universe being also spiritual. We talk about it's the science of channeling, okay, being able to see the nervous system and different waves and frequency for when you channel, when you don't. So we're going to get very excited because there's so much more that we can see in Aquarius by adapting waves and frequencies and technology advancements. And this is what creates scientific breakthroughs for when the innovators manage to communicate to themselves to the conservative. And this is where you get the consensus in science. Okay, technology is the bridge between innovative science, which basically what people call pseudoscience. Okay, we call pseudoscience very likely the innovative science, where people look at structures and dynamics that are not linear. And then comes technology and like, oh my God, you're able to observe that. Oh my God, this is the brainwave of a person who is channeling. This is the brainwave of a person who's not channeling. Oh, those are different wavelengths. Oh my God, there exists channeling. And then conservatives all the way, I have to learn channeling. Okay, and then they channel Ahriman or so, which is what Rudolf Steiner predicted. As a Rosicrucian, but these things were both planned by Inquisition, okay? So to prolong, because if they tell you have to go to so many centuries to have just kind of lower desires not connected with the heart, and then so many centuries just kind of mind the desires, the Ahriman, okay, so the Lucifer, the Ahriman, and then kind of like disconnected with the soul, and then you will go through integration, bringing them together. And this is what all the spiritual gurus say. All the people that rape children perpetually en masse, all of what they say is you take like a Bible. Oh, yes, the Bible too. Yes, it's true. And so how do we separate our cosmology, spirituality teachings we go by, even astrology, from the cult, without making it a witch hunt, okay? Because certain things are applicable, but certain things are also applicable because of the context of the times. If I take, for example, Emily Harper, or I take myself, Emily Harper suffered religious abuse and she openly says she takes Zoloft that she needs. She wouldn't outdo the Zoloft, okay? I never got along with those meds and I really wanted a magic pill, okay? But when I took amphetamines for a while, then it helped me process my traumas more so than anything they tried to give me to balance my nervous system, which I myself in the beginning wanted, but then it was like you were forced to try this if you wanted to receive help, whether with housing, with food, which means like your welfare, and to study and so on. So you kind of had to very bargain on your well-being in order to get things that assist you for the well-being, which for me it was studies. So it's a very different story, okay? I don't like this. For Emily, she needed the Zoloft and she was angry at the school that wouldn't let her take her Zoloft into the youth school. And then, take a person who's dealing with the depression of ritual abuse, okay? So you can say, yeah, the problem was the ritual abuse, not the Zoloft. Right now, she needs that freaking Zoloft. Okay, I'm not pro taking away, okay, what helps the person. So that is going to be a major challenge when Pluto is going to aquarify for good, because people are going to be like, oh, you get mad, you get disturbed, okay, you get disturbed, you want to change, you act on that change, but we're going to enter again, whether it is the youth revolution, and then they're going to try and take basically the trapped kids of the industry, okay? Those we see their faces, including the Pope, okay? Those you see their faces. But what they don't tend to is the wealth structure. And I if L'Homme Rebelle was talking about this by Albert Camus, but nobody, like, who the F is Albert Camus? And this is so, let's say the skibidi toilet generation, that would be the Starbucks revolution, okay? The Starbucks, it's like, oh, we do embargo on Starbucks. Okay, great. It's probably because it's a bank and they do offshore money lending and they use your money to traffic children and then they money launder things. And no, because they are not pro-Palestine. But what does that mean? We trade with there is an Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce. It's just that the money doesn't get to the people because there is also internal corruption in Palestine. And so on and so forth. But they are doing genocide, but they're doing this. But what's happening is we have a global World Health Organization that is funded by the Inquisition, the same Spanish Inquisition. The Jewish were told to either become Christians or become offshore monkey business, banning money laundering that later they would be cursed for, and make invention that Jesus was like this, Jesus was like that. Okay, Jesus did not like monkey business, okay? They said that the Jews betrayed, that the Jews this, that the Jews that, or they would be tortured, or they would run to Africa, okay? For which later they would also colonize Africa. That's like, yes, maybe you say, okay, for the Israel states funded by Rothschild, is less the problem. For when Rothschild has to cut dividends for the Inquisition, that's now you got it. So now you got that if you're in Israel, you're going to get tortured by Arab doctors so that you will think that Arabs want to kill you. But who gave the order? An Ashkenazi Jew. You better bet. You better bet. Okay, you better bet. And it's not the fault of the Ashkenazi Jews. It's not that all Ashkenazi. No, it's not about Ashkenazi Jewish. It's about the eugenics that make people hate on each other. But if you're in Palestine, you better bet they're gonna put an Israeli doctor, preferably as white as possible. So you're gonna fall into the black-white thingy, okay, which got nothing to do with Semitism, both Semitic. Unless you're in Africa, okay, then there are the Jews of Egypt, the Jews of Ethiopia, and so on and so forth. They were castrated in Israel. But then if you're in Palestine, you would be tortured by Israeli doctors. So you would think it's coming from Israel. It's coming from the same Inquisition. And even Rothschild and Rockefeller have to got dividends for the Inquisition. So we basically haven't healed from the Inquisition yet. Okay? Now, if you get that when you're 17, when you're 16, when you're 20, you're way far off than just the first step that like, hey, war crimes are horrid. Oh, this is something that's on the news. The war crimes are usually not on the news. You don't hear a lot about Congo. You don't hear a lot about Taiwan. You didn't hear that Kim Jong-un begged Hillary Clinton to get the American person that was inside the DPRK back to the United States. And Hillary was actually in this place, she was defending pedophiles, but in this case, she was okay. And the Congress was just drying her up until Kim Jong-un got that Hillary is not a poor position. He wanted to turn only to her. And this person, this American person, could have been a spy. And America didn't want it back. But Assange, they must take him. Was not a citizen. They must from Australia to Belmarsh to this and fuck up everybody's sovereignty on the way. Okay, it was Wikipedia that leaked Hillary Clinton's emails. That you don't talk about. Also, when in 2017, okay, the Me Too, and a Me Too veteran, you heard about the Me Too, but what you didn't, why were we allowed to speak and believed and so on and so forth with the world gone right? No, it's just that Assange began to serve his time in Belmarsh and they didn't want us talking about that. And I say it as a Me Too veteran. I say it as a Me Too veteran. So those type of things are very important for us to understand before the B6 style perfects, because you're going to see the revolution becoming the cult. You're going to see, and Israel was very, very, very clear before 7th of October, before everything. There was Supreme Court changes and people rebelled both for and against that. And then they began demonstrations. What happened is that one group of the rebels had the money to buy the front page of every Israeli newspaper, okay, from Haaretz, the left, to Mariv, to Israel Hayom, which is kind of like a Bibiton, we call it, okay, the right wing. And all of the front pages, it was a Friday, Black Friday, like Sefer October, all black screen. Pardon the Jag Right, yeah, the Jag Right, I was getting Jag Right. I'm getting Jaguar Right vibes, but this is so. This is so. I don't know why am I getting Jag Right vibes on this. I will be tuning up to see what you have to say, and will she target these issues too. But you see that the rebels, what you thought, oh, you fell on the wrong generation. That was the hymn. You fell on the wrong generation. We're going to this if you think there weren't demonstrations for occupation, against occupation of Palestine, whatever that means. There's an Israeli-Palestinian Chambers of Commerce. There's a Palestinian head of state, Abu Mazen, right? Abu Mazen. But the money doesn't reach Palestinian people. For some reason, they don't have like job sovereignty. It's like, but we sell them, right-wing parliament members sell them material to build their homes. Get some sort of corruption, but it's business corruption that affects the sovereignty of both countries. And you see, oh, finally, the rebels, you fell on the wrong generation. It sounds so good. We have power. We blocked the Ayalon bridge, which is a big juncture in Israel. We blocked the country. And then what? They buy the front page of every Israeli paper with the Black Saturday, but the Black Friday, blank page on all of the newspaper. Who had the money to buy this? We the people? Nah, never. This is what you must get right now, because Pluto is going, the clock strikes 12, Pluto is going to go into Aquarius. You can get it now, or you can get it 20 years from now. But 20 years from now, you'll be shooting all of your friends on a witch hunt and keeping alive only the people who put you to the Inquisition. Pluto is definitely on the IC. Definitely begin on the IC this time. So, Black Moon Lilith Al-Qaeda. I was surprised to see that the Romania, you want to watch my Romania episode. I was definitely right about religion. They have like 85% Orthodox Christians, Roman Orthodox Christians. So they definitely care a great deal about religion. Very Orthodox country. When it comes to natural resources, I was also correct. There were more resources, but yes. What more? I need to learn more about like the politics and so on, because I don't know. Oh, when it comes to like the Pisces Virgo opposition of Jupiter and Venus, I was also very correct with people having, big poets and great, very interesting culture. So there's a lot more to learn there. I'm still learning. So I will, and I might even do a little bit of linguistics if I get to learn a little bit about the language and to have a model for analysis for the language. So maybe I can present it to you in the spirit of Venus Kazimi, because I don't know the language, but even structurally to see what's going on is sometimes interesting. Where do they put the verb? Where do they put the noun? And so on, how people think. So yes, Jupiter is the Romania is going through a lot of changes. You want to see that episode, like all eyes on Romania. You want to be looking at Romania, you want to be following Romania, if you're anyway interested, you want to be understanding what's going to happen there. So you have a little bit of context. Black Moon Lilith, that for me was the Black Moon Lilith, that and on Al-Qaeda. And then Jag Wright assassinated everybody. But I think Uranus on Algol, okay, is starting to happen. And then all eyes on Israel for the Uranus Algol. This is annoying for both Israelis and the world, but it needs to come out. They're going to be all eyes on Israel. It's going to be big revolution to the identity, to the leaders, explosion of hidden leaders, and so on. I think when the Israel name is mentioned right now, the name Rothschild is mentioned, and I like that because I like that people start mentioning the names of the people who are in power rather than the powerless. And Israel will have to understand it's seen as a cult and an experiment. I think David Icke has been doing a great job changing the narrative from the Jews to the people we need to talk about. And I'm very glad that, he listened to people like me or people who commented to him, and always communicate with these people. Okay, they listen to what you have to say. They're not, not interacting. So call them out when you need to call them out, but also listen to what they have to say. Because I think, yes, if I take a look at the children calling their penis a bone breaker, and other things that I think I have repressed, and understanding what does that affect, for when they are attracted to someone and they want to have sexual relations, and they would get a complete rejection, okay, and wouldn't understand why, and think something wrong with them, so they would be excluded and marginalized because of what was done to them, that they were now seeing their genitals as something that is bone breaker and to fight, to this, to that, to like as if to fuck was not like, big enough for trouble. It's kind of like getting even worse, and this is doing really like horrid stuff for thought to be children perpetrators. Where is it coming from? I don't know. But this Uranus on Israel's sun is going to be very loud, and it's going to be a preliminary test for Israel to pass the test to go to the Uranus opposition when Uranus enters Gemini, because and is going to conjoin Sedna again. Gemini has been extremely loud. That's been 7th of October for Israel. So yes, Israel really need to release itself from the Inquisition. Must release itself from the Inquisition. No more feeding Jewish children and Jewish this to the Palestinian doctors that are getting orders from Inquisition so that they will hate the Arabs and be afraid of them. And no more for Palestinians to be fed Israeli doctors to torture kids. And then they would say, oh, Israel, Israel, Israel. When the orders are still, it's the money going to the Inquisition. It's the same thing. So will Israel tend to that? And so with Uranus, again, what I was happy is that we passed the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction, but I was afraid of kind of like an Ayatollah religious revolution. Those forces are there, but we're heading towards secularism. So it's an age of secularism with attempts to make like a one world secular religion, but then we must be aware of like the witch hunt, okay? So this Uranus is also striking points on Jack Wright's natal chart. She's son Gemini, recently had a birthday, so happy solar return. But also, I don't remember what is this that she had on Algol, but now Uranus there is going to really, it's getting her viral already. It's getting her voice heard. It's good time for her, very likely to drop an album. I know she's working on one. And with Uranus, it's kind of like it's a shocking, expect the unexpected kind of thing. So this is going to be interesting to watch. And also we must vouch for our whistleblowers. So remember, okay, the people are ready with the just like we had the Free Britney and it's ongoing, the Free Jag and the Protect Jag is on, and is on for a reason. That's not to say she didn't commit crimes, and so she addresses that. It's more like she's beginning to bring a voice that is decultified as possible into the discourse, and that is and expose for what are the people that we missed, the people that we didn't hear of. Okay, the Amaris and the Aliyahs and the Left Eyes and the Tupacs, and those we didn't get to even hear their name, for what happens for when we do hear, and also how is this affecting our life. Okay, when I grew up on Little Kim and rap, and she says if you wanted to get paid, you had to be a rapper. What was all the rapping about? That affects the sexual lives of people. That's affecting the ability to be in the bodies, making us more susceptible to people who communicate in cultist way, to get us outside of the body. So when you have someone who's approaching you in a way that makes you feel more feminine, immediately you think like, okay, I can be honest with this person. I can maybe trust this person to be honest, and so on. And then they called you, and you don't even have the reference for what it's like to be inside your body during intimacy. So this is the match to a person who's been cultified. And we want to go back to our bodies, which is a journey. And so that's something we need to remember. Again, I had no business the age I was listening to rap to listening to, you know, basically talking about people sex trafficked, making it sound like it's sex work or whatnot. Um, and it's kind of like it didn't represent what I think, what my this, what my that, but I also understood they come from a different cultural background. Many of them were prostitutes, child prostitutes. Little Kim was a child prostitute before she entered the music industry. Okay, it was supposedly vouched for by Biggie, which later means she had to contend with Puff Daddy, which many things. And then you kind of have to be assassinating your opponents or competitors or whatnot. So that is something that we all need to kind of take into account. And it's important when you talk about Uranus that the revolution, a lot of it is also cultified. So when you have the revolutions doing mass protests, and then they buy every newspaper and have all their advertisement, you understand you are dealing with the controlled opposition, and these are young children, these are young people that did not get the proper education, even in Ivy League. To put a student next to an Israeli right-wing person she could basically eat with salt, had she mentioned what some Palestinian men mentioned, what about the castrating of Ethiopian women? What about the Holocaust survivors that were considered the lean Jew? When was it that Israel started acknowledging the Holocaust and have a memorial there? What year exactly? Okay, she could eat him without salt, but all she got to say is that people in Dresden, Germany, no civilian died in Dresden, Germany during the Second World War. Okay, this is what an Ivy League or an Oxford or an Oxbridge student that very likely her parents had to donate organs for her to even get there. Sell her body. Had to say, and she's not to be blamed for it, because that's Ivy League today. Gone is the FOMO from not going to Harvard, MIT. Gone is the FOMO. She could eat this person without salt. What about the castration of Ethiopian women? When was it exactly that Israel started acknowledging the lean Jews? That she wasn't even taught that. Even if you treat it like a rap battle, make it at least accurate, make it at least interesting. And she didn't even have these tools. Why she didn't have these tools? Because people much prefer for her to take advantage of the naive and genuinely caring nature for wanting to change the world, for when we should change the world, and then feed it with some it's okay to rape women if they are from that class or that race or that not whatnot, which again fits for the patriarchal inquisition, and fumbles with the sexuality of young boys, young children. Okay, so this Uranus on the bisextile really needed to be paying big emphasis too. It's going to be women, it's going to be music industry, it's going to be queer society, even queer societies. Okay, I want you to think, like, take all of the drag queens that you love watching in RuPaul's drag show, listen to Jack Wright, and make a copy paste to that fucking industry. You better bet that these people are going through at least as much assault, at least as much satanic ritual abuse. That's going to be your goal. And on a mundane level, the first country we see is the son of the state of Israel. So if you're going to keep at, we are doing embargo on Starbucks, not because they're a bank, they're doing offshore banking, they're very likely laundering money, very likely trafficking children, very likely children get raped and trafficked and have their organ donated, traded in. And dividends are cut to the Vatican to update to the Inquisition. But because they are supporting this country, supporting that country, on a very very, it's a show made for you to watch and not targeting the real things, okay? Or criticizing Israel for responding to its civilians being raped rather than for not listening to the watchers, women, for months and months and months, when they warned there's going to be something. We see a weird activity, and they were threatened, but their life was threatened. They were kidnapped, they were raped, they were tortured, they were burned alive in their own houses. The houses were burned and destroyed because they warned something is going to be up. And who were targeted? Anybody that was pro-Palestinian, that tried to talk about two-state solution, or one-state solution where people all get their rights. That try to talk about kind of changing the ongoing perpetual war, was as Julian Assange said, was interrupting them in having a Mein Kampf, okay, living on the sword. So they tried. If you were taking psychedelics, if you were doing weed, would you go to a nature party? Do you live? Would you, if you have no house to live, maybe you would go to work in agriculture. Then you would be raped and assaulted and tortured there. Okay. They tried and tried and tried. They were kidnapped to hospitals to make, before they make such kidnappings, all of this planned with infiltrated World Health Organization and welfare organizations, all funded and cutting funding to the Inquisition. You want to talk about the genocide in Gaza? Let's talk about the democide in Israel. Where was the world? Of course, Israel would respond. Because if it wouldn't, all those Waxman pedo called Epstein rings, elected top rank in every Supreme Court, army, social service, everything, all these people would democide their own commanders, their own soldiers, put them in psychic wards until they want to kill themselves, and they don't let them even kill themselves when they do. And then everybody says, oh, IDF, IDF, IDF. Yeah, because that's all you got left. It's the people who stayed alive. That's what you got left. People making a drug show in Khan Yunis. That's what you got left. The rest died. And the reason anybody didn't know anybody when it comes to the pedo rings. So, a little bit of Uranu algal vibes. Okay? What we got in Netherlands? Why am I getting that? Yeah, we got Chiron sitting pretty on the 22nd degree of Aries. So assassination, assassination, wound around assassination. I'm telling you right now for Netherlands, it's not so much the Aries, my prediction. There's still going to be a Ketu on Geert Wilders' Mercury in this next eclipse cycle, which is ruled by Venus, which is next to his Pluto. It's a Ketu thing. So like he had a saying of kind of like the Minder Americana, blah, 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 that might rise again. But I don't predict, like, maybe I'm wrong. I don't predict nothing much for that thing. The big eclipses for him already happened. What I am going to take you through, that distinguished gentleman really had to be cautious for if he is supporting the type of medication, chemistry, drugs, psychic words, whatever that oppress women. WHO, okay? That one, he really has to be cautious, both because he has Jupiter and Saturn on the 18th degree, sextiling each other, but particularly that eclipse with Ketu on his Mercury is going to pin at the Venus and Pluto conjunction that he has in Virgo. And he has been generally having great karma with women, okay, supporting women that exit violence in Islam. And I don't know, he's living a long-term partnership. But he had a journalist that was vouching for him, was ethically hacking, whistleblower, and she managed to get his security in check, forced them to do their job, okay? And so he's been having great karma with women overall. They're going to try and get at him to support a bad gynecological practice that's taken from the Inquisition. He must not fall for that. Okay, you have to remember, he must not fall for that. And so also, he has good karma with women. Use of that karma, use of these women and their advice to get out of this, because that can, the only thing that's vouching for him right now is basically those women that escaped religious violence, and the women that are vouching for him, it might not agree even politically, but they're vouching for him because they see that he's trapped in the Inquisition, clumps, and they see what's going on. So he should use upon this wisdom of these women, so that he is vouched for, okay? Because that is the only thing. If they make them, he must understand. I will talk about the freeze later, but he must understand, for them, how they're going to try and take him out, and how susceptible for trying to take him out if they make him do something bad to women. Okay, then he lose mandate of the heaven. Okay, the good karma he has with women, great karma with women, then he will lose of this karma. But he can use these women to, is not eclipse child, it's not necessarily something that must happen. Use of this wisdom to get out of this, to hack his way out of this. But he's been great supporter of the voice of women who've been marginalized and got out of oppression. So this is for Netherlands. And now we're going to what the heck is going to be with Saturn in the upcoming months and the Rahu in Pisces eclipse cycle. And this is going to be, we know that Netherlands and drugs have a very intricate, long life history. Netherlands treats drug differently, and there are still drug cartels. And Netherlands treat WHO, okay, there are various forces that treat it differently. I want to talk about what happened to someone that this Saturn is going to go over the midheaven again retrograde, and then again direct, and then go to their Mars, and they're deceased. That's better the freeze. And yes, his name is coming up again, and it's not over. It's not over. For the next 2-3 years even, not over. Next upcoming months, big Saturns, big revelations around his life mission, and so on. That midheaven was ruled by Jupiter that is now having Lilith crossing over it. So definitely I predict the Ming stuff coming out. And I want to talk about how basically that they got him to get himself assassinated. And so basically I spoke about the fact that people who are doing cold cases and crime journalists, they must vouch for themselves, and they must be, and the police is not going to do the job. They have to have a mafia or crime family vouching for them. Okay, so that limits what they can do, but they also have to vouch for themselves to the court for when they bring people to justice. And he did that with someone called Joris de Mink. And we understand if somebody is the Supreme Court, they're going to be incredibly corrupt. And so for the court system has been trying to take down the Freeze because he was exposing malfunction in the police when they were solving cases. The level that the corruption that he could expose, he was standing to. Also vouching for Moroccan people. So of course they wanted him to be assassinated by Moroccan mafia. And essentially what happened is that he defended the Mink. And the Mink was accused of child trafficking and performing snuff videos, which is raping children on camera, young children. And the Freeze was in a position where he defended this guy, and that of course put him in a very difficult situation, and creating a situation where those children, those young girls, young boys, would feel annihilated by the very man you turn to when you have been marginalized, which was the great defender, the great fighter for the underdog. So that was, of course, a by design thing that's done, okay? And then when they tried to assassinate him, there were what they would doing eventually is to have someone to testify against a Moroccan mafia. Okay, we spoke against being racist towards Moroccan people, and for someone to have a state witness that wants to bring to justice the Moroccan mafia. And the state witness had a wife and children. The Freeze himself also had wife and children, or a divorced wife. They were still in good contacts and children at the time, and he understood he understood what this means for him. But what happened is that when it came to the state witness, there were a lot of leaked photographs of everybody involved. That was leaked from the Supreme Court. And you understand it's a high class against Moroccan mafia, the Marengo trials. Yes. And so what happened is that when he decided to help the state witness, because the state witness had wife and children, he understood that he's going down. But what they made to do is for, of course, the Moroccan mafia to get him. The design of this structure was done by Supreme Court, because they test people all the time, but to see for the Freeze, he was standing two cold cases of people, but not two against organized crime. And this was a change in strategy for him, because he was a person that was very, if he would see someone in a poor situation, it's kind of, that was the way to get to him. Okay, if you wanted to get to him, that was the way to get to him. Okay, and so what they got to him through a person that had a family and children, and was state witnessed against organized crime, for family that was known to the family, and they got him to help the state witness. Then, of course, the usual stunts, where you get either a kidnapping of Mr. Heineken for security. By the way, what Wilders is coping with for 2.5 decades, free Wilders, or you get zero, nada. Okay, it's like red carpet for the assassin. So of course the person who would shoot them, and I think they were Polish people that were hired and then were abandoned and so on. So of course the people that would shoot them would be like immigrants, but you understand that the order, and of course it would be like, yes, of course it's Marengo, it's this, it's that, but it's important to understand who set for the situation, and who is a big word here. It's WHO taking over, and in every country they do it differently. So in Israel we have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Ukraine, Russia, Crimea, and so on. And for Netherlands, it's like drugs. Okay, so what we have a situation for, when he does agree to help a state witness, who knows if he would not stop defending the Supreme Court. And I'm not talking the Mink, because the Mink was not in office, I think, back then already. But I'm talking whoever is the new the Mink. For they have to do the same thing for the cult, for otherwise they're not trusted. They do these snuff films so that they are photographed doing this, and then if people want to change them, it's no problem. Yeah, this was pedophile, this was this was that, and that's why they do it. And so what they did, it was like, well, he protected his state. Of course he was. It's naturally, it's the freeze. And so when that happened, that was setting him up for assassination, but was setting him up for assassination not because of drug cartels, or because of this, or because of that, but basically because that would be a strategy where he could help a state witness who would also testify for, or in the Marengo trials might also come what's happening, what the corruption with the Supreme Court. And so, yes, and this is, if you want to hear about another case where there were people wrongfully accused of murder and pedophilia, when they were corrupt in other ways, but just not in those ways, you want to hear about Hussein Babizin. And that is all coming back around, okay? All of that coming back around, and they kind of try to target the family through a Against Saturn team, like, whatever. But that is all coming back around because it's very obvious that the Freeze put the word WHO up front and fended for that as he fended for other things. So that is coming for the Netherlands, okay? That is coming. That is not going to be maybe as viral as the solar eclipses in Aries, but it's definitely coming for the Netherlands. We're definitely going to hear the name the Freeze over and over and over until people are sick of it. We're definitely going to be seeing what's behind all of these drug cartels suddenly miraculously being tended to. We're definitely going to see in the Supreme Court anybody who's been a lawyer being targeted. I have alluded to that in past videos. I think that we're going to see more of the same. This is why they try to get at anybody that's doing juristics. And for juristics also, because you can be killed and assassinated over certain trials, not only criminal law, then you have to have families vouching for you, and this does mean mafia, this does mean drug cartels, like whoever is the people that can do the job when the police does not do the job, and you have to bargain for justice in the same way and to vouch for them in the same way, but you also have to have a double interest to vouch for somebody in the Supreme Court. So this is something for people to really understand structurally. And this is very likely how about the Vries got so involved with the Mink, Maurice the Mink, and got in position, was totally out of his element. And if you watch him, like, this is like satirical versus if you watch him doing his job, which was like misdaadgeslagen and helping people. But that is also bringing in those discussions. I think anything to do with the drug cartels, the reality check around this, yes, the WHO basically competing with the drug cartels and putting it like it is removing of corruption. Yes, so of course we don't like to have people human trafficked and kidnapped and pushing drugs that are very dangerous to society, but we also don't like to have working labor schedule that's putting people in positions where they get no therapy, they're blamed for their choices, they're homeless while working full-time job, they're completely militarily disciplined, and they have to take the drugs to get to the next shift, okay? Like if we don't address that, we haven't addressed any drug issue in society. And I met people that were drug users and dealing with addiction to that. seen it. Like I've, when you see it, okay, you understand that whatever people think about people who are addicted to drugs, flip it 180 and then you get the truth. Okay, if you think they're not disciplined, they don't care for themselves, they have no backbone, or make wrong decisions, or make this, or don't take responsibility, flip it over 180, flip it over. That's not the story. It's by design meant for them to be in those situations so money can be traveled around. I think Saturn is going to pinpoint that both in medicine and in drugs. So that is more for the Rahu phase. But when Saturn is going to go over the 18th degree again, y'all gonna hear the name, the phrase. If y'all speak Dutch, you're gonna hear that name. There's no way around it. And for people, it's like, when is it going to be over? It's going to be over when Rahu strikes Aquarius. Not the second before, okay? Because it goes for the Saturn retrograde and direct is at least 1 year. Then we get into the Rahus, and the second of his generation has a Rahus, okay? Then the entire Rahus, and then Rahu is in Aquarius. Not the second before that. So brace yourself. Stuff are going to leak. Secrets are going to come to the surface. Structure, okay, reality check on the structure. But these things are important for us to understand and for the victims of the mink to get justice and to be heard and to be believed, because they went through horror. That was, and really no place to go to, because the only person that could really vouch for them had to be affiliated with the mink. Otherwise, he would get no murderer in prison. And that is structurally important to remember. So that is something I do have to kind of get off my chest. When I saw this, like, oh my God, this is just going to be. But sometimes knowing that, it's like, brace yourself. That's what it's going to be. That's how long it's going to take, very likely. So brace yourself. For the world, it's just WHO stuff. 18th degree, Saturn, poison, medicine, all the rest. Trying to push another COVID, like all of that stuff is going to go viral. Been there, horrid. That's what's up. Anything more for today? Yeah. So let's just take a look at the chart of the moment. Oh, yes, you see when the name came up. 22nd degree Leo, trining this Chiron in Aries, tending to the wound of assassination. Okay. So, yeah, of course it's going to be at 22 degree when I talk about this. What, am I going to send it over for like a 22? Well, before it hits Saturn, then yes, and that's it. So have a more or less pleasant Friday. Venus is on the 18th degree of, like this toxic degree, but she's going to come out of it by tomorrow, very likely, and we're going to continue our time. For now, Saturn is out of the 18th degree, so by that, before it gets to the 22 or retrograde, we have some just mellow Saturn, unvaccinated sperm for presidents demonstration. That's what the Dutchies did. And vibes, which I think is relatively okay. Thank you for the likes, shares, comments, and everything. Thank you for still being my viewers after all of these things of which I do. And I'm going to upload it now before it gets Saturn hour.